Ladies and gentlemen, today, welcome to Strauss & Company, and I'll talk about, this is indeed an honor today to introduce a special guest, Jack Ginsberg, also associated with Strauss & Company in your own way, and Wilhelm van Rensburg, speaking about artist books and portfolios. Jack, through his generous work with the Wits Art Museum, has really, I suppose, come to epitomize the collector of the book as a unique product. With Jack, I believe you'll tell us later, but really one of the largest collections of artist books in the world, I think, in the Southern Hemisphere. But you must correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, probably when I had them in my personal capacity, I think probably one of the largest personal collections in the world. Amazing. But now, having donated them to Wits, it's certainly not the largest university collection in the world. I mean, Harvard and Yale and other places and museums have larger collections, but not as accessible.
Well, Jack, I think without any further ado, let me hand over, and I'm going to leave you in the competent hands of Wilhelm, and take it away. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Thank you.
Wilhelm, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and so you can, and let me just allow participants to share screen. That should be, it should have clicked over. There we go.
Yeah. Right, is that the full screen? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Matt. And as you indicated, we are very fortunate to offer quite a large number of artist books and portfolio on the current online auction that closes on Monday at 8 o'clock. And we're even more lucky to have Jack Ginsberg here. You indicated that he is one of the biggest collectors of artist books in the world. He's in fact ranked among the top 5 in the world. Jack, I think your name is synonymous with the whole concept of artist books. But just give us an indication. How would you define an artist book? Where do you think it fits into the pecking order of in the arts? You know, we know paintings, we know sculpture, but tell us more about artist books. Jack, I think you're muted.
You just have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. The definition of an artist book is a complicated one, almost as difficult as the definition of art. There's a website called philobiblon.com, which deals with artist books, and they've got, I think, about 18,000 pages dealing with the subject of what is and what isn't an artist book. But we take the widest possible definition, the kind of Duchampian definition. Art is what an artist says is art, and an artist book is what a book artist says is a book. So, but artist books, we include such things as literary magazines like Wilhelm and Iswe. We include such sort of objects as bitter comics, for example, and certain design magazines like Juicy. But I would say that most artist books look like a codex, but not all. We also have what are called BSOs. A BSO is a book sculpted object, which looks like a book, or a book-shaped object, which looks like a book, but might be made out of metal. For instance, it could be a sculpture of a book. And then book-shaped objects and book-sculpted objects. So the definition, I will show you some rather peculiar things. I think when Wits took on my collection, they were expecting a nice row of kind of square books, and they ended up with some really peculiar things which they weren't sure were books at all, but which we consider to be books because the artist considers them to be a book.
Let me show the viewers a couple of your books, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, please. Can I talk at the same time?
Sure, go for it.
This is what's called a movable book, or it's a very elaborate pop-up book, if you like. Probably one of the largest we've got in that category. And this is a kinetic book which moves. Another unusual book by an American artist. This is a sculpted book, if you like. So the last one is slightly more conventional. It's a one-off, a unique book made with collage and pop-ups by another American artist, but on a Mexican theme. In the background, you'll see the new Book Art Center, which I'll talk about later.
Jack, do you remember the very first book, artist book you bought, and what do you consider to be some of the first South African artist books then?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the first artist books I ever saw was at a bookshop in London called Basilisk Press Bookshop, which dealt in artist books. And coming from a background of literature, my parents were more interested in literature. I was interested in art and sculpture. This seemed to be a kind of combination of both. It was an early book by the Janus Press, run by Claire Van Fleet in Vermont, in New York, in America. And eventually I wrote to her and said, I found the most extraordinary thing. Do you have any others? And she said, plenty. I've been making them for years. This was in about 1970, I think. And eventually I managed to get to fly out to Vermont, meet her, and subscribe to her press. And I think we now have every book she ever made. So fantastic. That was one of the first artist books I bought. But what was your second part of the question?
You know, some of the first South African artist books then.
Well, we've got about 440 South African artist books in the collection, 185 from the 20th century and 220 from the 21st century. So we have some early ones. I see you've put up Nesos. So Battiss was definitely an outlier and an early contributor to South African artist books. In fact, in 1945, he made a book called Homecoming, which I think he auctioned more than once. It's actually a portfolio, but we certainly consider it an artist book. And then in 1951, he did Fragments of Africa, which comes up often, either as a portfolio or individual items from that. But Nesos only came about quite late in his life, in 1968, when he was in his fruit period. But anyway, it's the most extraordinary thing, and I must tell you, I must describe, I think, here that this is an exploded version of the book, by which I mean unbound and then framed. That's not what one does to an artist book normally, but in this case, Warren Siebert's had a copy badly bound and his wife happens to be a wonderful bookbinder, and it needed rebinding. So they exploded the book by unstitching it and unbinding it, so we could show the entire book. I mean, the book in its entirety, which had never been done before, because most of them are bound as a codex. But certainly one of the great, if not the greatest, South African artist book, and these days certainly one of the most expensive of the South African artist books, because you're getting a huge number of original silk screens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that your books are all at the Wits Art Museum. Now, tell us a little bit about that center and what we're looking at here.
Yes, well, I was on the board of the Wits Art Museum and love the place. It's a wonderful institution, popular in Johannesburg. And as I was having intimations of mortality, I thought, what am I going to do with all these books? And after several years of negotiation with the university, we entered into a wonderful win-win situation where they provided this extraordinary space, this wonderful space, which, as you know, is a premium in universities, at a premium. And I gave them the books, they gave the space, and a special collections librarian who was appointed last year, Rosalind Cleaver. And we provided the furniture. We've got wonderful vitrines and wonderful architectural drawers for big books which can lie flat, and prints, and a research center where people can come and look at the books. This is a display of our latest exhibition. The grey vitrines in front, which you can see in front of you, are contiguous, which means that you can open up a book for the entire length of the vitrine, which is very unusual. In fact, not this one, but the one on the opposite wall, we believe, is the largest contiguous vitrine in the universe.
Wow. Well,
we've certainly never heard of another one that long.
And what are we looking at here?
This is the backstage. This is the stacks where we keep all the books, which obviously not really available to the public, but you can certainly come in and have a look at it. This is in its first iteration. We've since rearranged all the books. It's taken months. It took months to get the books from my house into the collection. There are about 8,000 books altogether, about 3,500 artist books, and about 3,500 books about artist books, which we call
absolutely incredible.
The research collection. And that is what attracts the academics, the actual bibliography about artist books. So we call it the archive because everything I could ever find about artist books, I bought. Whereas every artist book I've ever seen, I certainly haven't bought because I haven't had the budget. So it's.
Now you mentioned the academics, and I get the sense that we have a wonderful community here of artist books collectors and academics and so on. What is the typical? Where do you meet? What do you do? What do you talk about? Because I know you're quite active in this sphere.
Well, when I had my books at home, and behind me you can see some of the empty shelves, which I'm busy still cleaning up after taking this huge collection to the university. I used to have really quite a lot of academic people coming from all over the world, mainly not to look at the artist books, because you can see artist books in many of the great libraries, all the universities, Yale and Harvard and Victoria and Albert and the British Museum and every European capital, and the Far East. Korea is very big in artist books. But people used to make their way to Johannesburg in order to see the books about artist books. And these were often people doing theses or academic research on the subject of artist books. And I often asked them, why come to Johannesburg? You could go to the New York Public Library. And they would say, in the New York Public Library, we can only see 20 a day, 12 a day. In my library, they could see 500 a day, and then it took me months to put everything together after they left. So now we have a librarian which deals with that, and I don't have to do it anymore. So, yeah.
Good for you. Because I know you also, are actively involved in academia, for instance. What we're looking at here is, in fact, the cover of the program for that wonderful colloquium that you organized in 2017.
Yes, this was fantastic. This was at the instance of David Payton, who's one of the world's experts on artist books, and certainly the world's expert on South African artist books. And this was a symposium he arranged at UJ. I'll show you later on when we get onto the website, which was one of the largest, I think, ever. We dealt with book arts and books, and we had people coming from all over the world. And David gave talks, and there were walkabouts, and it was quite a fantastic event, ending with a talk between me and William Kentridge, because he's one of the people who has made many artist books.
Yeah, indeed, and you're also a part. That is fortunate because there is now a sort of a permanent exhibition space. But before that, you exhibited your work as well.
Yes.
Talk to us about these two exhibitions.
This is a sort of historic photograph where this is my library before it became denuded. So I've now moved non-artist books into the space. But so here I am showing off a book to a visitor or some interested party. And this was really a fantastic catalogue with artist books in the Ginsberg collection, which we did in 1996 at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. And we discovered afterwards, I mean, South Africans are so great because they don't know what they can't do. We discovered afterwards that it was one of the largest artist book exhibitions ever held in the world. So, yeah.
And the one on the left, I think, was the exhibition at UJ during that colloquium.
Yes. I've got, that's right. I've got artist books in the Ginsberg collection up at the moment. And the Skotnes one, yes, of course. That was the catalogue cover. Just happens to show my library.
Okay. Now you mentioned the website, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's probably very unique and probably the most comprehensive website that you do have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if you don't mind pulling up your website and talk to us about that.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you see that?
It's coming up. There we go.
Good. So to give you some background on the website, David Payton actually established this website and has been really in charge of it and has created it as part of his doctoral thesis, or at least it became part of his doctoral thesis, because it's really one of the most comprehensive websites of its sort in the world, I think. It was made for artist books in South Africa, which was the subject of his thesis, and we're now converting it into the website for the Center for Book Arts at WAM. So it'll be slightly rebranded, because in addition to artist books in South Africa, we're also going to now incorporate all the international artist books. As I mentioned, there are only 440 South African artist books, but there are about 3,000 international artist books. But it's a really extraordinary website. I'll try and whip through it quickly. So the first thing is there's a database, and you can type in, you know, whatever you would like to see, and it'll bring up. I've just brought up Judy Mason, who we're going to discuss later. These are some of her artist books. There are 13 of them shown here. Here is a copy of the Dante Bestiary with a different binding, which we'll discuss when we look at the book itself. And these are some of the books. There is the Gospel According to Judas, which you've got on sale for this exhibition, this auction. So, and there is the other Judy Mason, which we're going to be discussing, Skotnes. Although it's spelled Skotnes, I believe that's an alternate spelling. Is that right? Or an alternate pronunciation?
Yes, yes, it's acceptable standard Afrikaans, don't worry.
Okay. I always thought it had an N, but anyway. So there are a few of the books. That's then that's the database where you can look up and actually get a view into many of the 440 South African artist books. And then there's a section on exhibitions. Samplings is the exhibition which we have on at the moment which we had on for the opening exhibition at WAM. We now have another exhibition, which of course few people have seen because of the lockdown. But one can go into the Samplings exhibition and look at South African books. This one, here we go. Here's a nice thing. Pippa Skotnes, who we're going to discuss later. This is what I call a BSO, a book sculpted object. I don't know if we can bring it up, make it larger. There you are. Now, why is this a book? This is a book because the text of the book is actually on the skeleton of the horse. I don't know if you look closely at the limbs and the ribs and the mane here. Is actually a book called the Book of the Divine Consolation, an extraordinary book which Pippa made. But so there's sorry, how do I've got to get out of this? Aha, there we are. Pippa Skotnes. There are a few close-ups. There you can see the text. Then there's another book sculpted object made out of wood here by Alan Lang. So BSO, sculptural object, it says. Okay, so, and then, so that was South African books, and then international books. Here we have a calligraphy book. This is all drawn by hand. And here we have some broadsides. Now, broadsides are one-page artist books, usually made with letterpress and handmade paper. And then this goes through the entire exhibition. So I just want to get back because I want to show you.
I'm Mr. Jane Steinberg. What's today?
I want to show you another interesting thing here. Wilhelm, do you remember this? This was an exhibition which you put on.
So was that at Art on Paper?
That's
exhibition?
Right. That's right.
Okay. Yes. Remember, you know, the interesting thing is that a lot of people told Alette and I at the time that it's very noble of us to put a non-commercial show up in a commercial gallery. We won't make any money. And it was one of our best-selling exhibitions ever.
Really, that's fantastic. In 2014, I see it says right here, AOP Gallery. So that's great, yeah. And yeah, and then there was this. This was the one I'm going to just open here. This was the exhibition at the Johannesburg Art Gallery in 1996, which. Gosh, I don't know. It's got so many things here. There's essays at the top, and opening address, the catalogue. Let's have a look. Let's just click on South African artist books. Aha. So we have Simon Stone, Philippa Hobbs. This is one of the most famous South African artist books ever. This is Willem Boshoff's 370-day project, which is made out of 370 different little blocks of wood which fit into this vitrine. And it's actually a diary of 370 days in his life. He carved one a day. So it's a wonderful conceptual artist book, and he certainly regards it as a book. He regards many things that he makes as a book. This is actually more bookish than many of the other things he regards as a book. So this is really a highlight of the collection, because I think it was in the South African arts curriculum for, matric, and I had dozens of school books, school groups coming to see the book, and they couldn't quite get over. They said, "Well, what is this?" I said, "This is the original." So they said, "But why is it here? And how come you've got it? And where are the others?" There are no others. This is it. It's a unique book. Often artist books are in very small editions, usually under 50 because a graphic technique is used. But this is unique, and there are many, many unique books in the collection. And in fact, next year, when we get back in business, we will probably have a special exhibition up dealing only with unique books.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
let's
fantastic.
just get back, and what were we? Here we are. So that was South African artist books. There's a featured South African artist book at all times. The one we've got up at the moment happens to be, let's just have a look, GIF 4. Now I see we've got GIF 3 on sale.
No,
Which
indeed.
is so interesting, because this is so here we show page by page of the book, and I think on your website you show page by page of GIF 3. So this is made by Mark Atwood, and the GIF books were. I'm just having a look. Gosh. There's too many notes. There are 4 GIF books. 2 were made early, and then there was a 21-year gap, and there have been 2 recent ones, GIF 3 and 4. 1 and 2 were at least 25 years ago, I guess. But they are absolutely wonderful artist books. They're actually portfolios, so you can take them out of the box and you can frame the whole lot. And I think, do you have a picture of that somewhere, Wilhelm?
Yeah, it's coming up. Don't worry, we'll get to it. Don't worry.
Okay, we'll get to it. Sorry. Okay. So going back here to exhibitions, then we have textual research, which is largely David's, but also other research on artist books by South Africans. Online resources, if anybody is interested in artist books, there's enough reading matter there with references to hundreds of websites dealing with the subject. And then we have the bibliography on artist books, which has a delightful picture of me and Wilhelm. Wilhelm looks very content. I look a bit more skeptical. But this is taken in the old library at WAM, sitting in front of Wilhelm's sculptural piece called Druid's Table. Bit of a reflection there, but I think you can see some of the carvings on the top of the table. So this also discusses how I started to collect artist books and became a bibliomaniac. The polite term is bibliophile, but I'm well beyond that. So let's just get back to the home page. So there are a huge number of things one can do and one can look at. If, for instance, we look at booknesses, had to go back quickly. Sorry, bear with me for one moment. I'm not very good at this.
No, you're doing well. You're doing well.
There, for instance, under booknesses, there's a whole section on it, the exhibition and catalogs, but there's also the talk with William. These are some of William's books. He made, you know, there've been over 100 art monographs published on William. Some of them are considered to be artist books, and some are just very intricate and beautiful monographs. So he made artist books, but he also made digital artist books, which don't exist except for the film. I'll give you a quick introduction.
Yes, please.
If I can. Don't quite know how to do that. Can you give me a minute? So on the first, I'll just show you a few snippets of this. The first book is an actual book in our collection, and here he is turning the pages quickly and filming the turning of the pages. So this is a real artist book. It's actually a flip book. That's the genre. And then, okay, there's one more. It's very quick, only half a minute. Interesting. So let me just go to the next one, which is at okay. This is a bit noisy. Can you hear the noise?
No, it's perfectly fine. Don't worry.
Okay. So this one is doesn't exist as a book. William has simply made a film using a book as the backdrop to the film. So he's actually painted onto the pages and then filmed the product. So nobody's got this book, not even William. It's a different kind of species altogether. Can then just show you one other, which was made by Mark Atwood. I think it's here. Here we go. This is the most wonderful book made by Mark Atwood in an edition of 50 copies, which, if you flip it fast enough, becomes a film, and it comes with a DVD, so you don't actually have to flip it. This is the DVD. So, yeah, it's an extraordinary thing, and just a huge amount of work involved. So this one now is a virtual book. This one does not exist, unlike the last one we saw. So this one was simply drawn onto the backdrop of a book. So if you want it, you can't have it. It doesn't exist in reality, only on film. So where were we? I've kind of lost track. Okay, I think carry on, Wilhelm.
I think, Jack, if you don't mind, let's look at some of the items on the online auction then.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, there we go. And just one moment, I'm just calling everything up here. Right, and so one of the books that we have on the online is, as you mentioned earlier on, the Judith Mason Dante bestiary. And she, of course, works in a very long tradition of these books on bestiary, as you can see from the cover of a catalogue of an exhibition at the Getty Institute in Los Angeles the end of last year. Books of beasts, the bestiary in the medieval world. And you can see the unicorn there and the likes. And Judith, let's look at her beasts. Here's one example of that. There's another creature. She includes creatures as well. And another one. The interesting thing is that she also wrote an essay about her selection, you know, as the title indicates, It is extracts or a couple of stanzas that she chose from Dante's Divine Comedy.
Yes.
And that she chose to work with all of that. And at the end of this book, she also wrote a long essay explaining her choice of stanza and a choice of creatures. And for me, the most fascinating line from that is Judith quoting a phrase from Claude Lévi-Strauss, where he purportedly said that animals are not only good to eat, they're also good to think with. And I think that is what she is doing in this particular book. I'm sure you can tell us more about this because you knew Judith quite well.
I knew Judith very well. We were cellmates, and she was a most extraordinary, self-effacing, incredible academic. You're lucky to have this book because this one was actually bound in New York. There was, I don't know what the edition was in total. I think it was
supposed to be 100.
Yeah, but I don't think they made anything like that number because eventually, I think about 8 of them were bound in South Africa. This book was published by Bondi Press, which was started by Caspar Schmidt. He was a South African who immigrated to New York, and he created this press in New York. And this one, it was printed in New York, and several of the copies, I think most of the copies were bound in New York. A few found their way back to South Africa. I have no idea how. That's why we've got a different binding. But I think this one is probably better with this half leather binding. Does it have a slip case, Wilhelm?
Yes, indeed. Yes, it comes with a slipcase.
Yes, I would think with such a fancy binding, it would come with a slipcase to protect the leather. So a really wonderful thing. Judy, as you saw earlier, has made dozens of books, and they are quite extraordinary. Some of them were made with her husband, Bruce Atwood, at the time.
That's right.
And they are fantastic. She made a lot of unique books as well.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one on the online
sorry,
sale.
may I just say one other thing?
Certainly.
A pump here. In our collection, we have some of the original sketches and pages dealing with this. It's called Judith Mason's Dante B-Series sketchbook. And if any of you are particularly interested, particularly the buyer of your copy on auction, should make an appointment when we ever get out of lockdown and come and have a look at some of the original things which we have at the library.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. We'll follow you up on that one. Let's move on to the next artist book on the online, The Gospel According to Judas. It's also by Judith Mason from 1982. There are 10 pages in this portfolio, an edition of 40. And here are some of the works in there. I'm just going to flip through that. And then for me, the fascinating thing is this. Now, here is Judith writing, and this is the first paragraph of her essay, her contribution to that famous Heather Martinchen Festschrift when she retired from Wits as head of department of the art department there. All her ex-students, and Judith studied under her, for instance, contributed either artworks or essays to that Festschrift, which was presented to her. This is Judith. She, or the first paragraph of her contribution, she writes here, and I'm not going to read everything. You can do it in your own time. But she is considering the fact that Judas was really sort of a victim of a fickle God, you know. So, as you can see, she uses the word the Gospels according to this man, Judas, and then her essay was called A Prospect of Icons, which was also the title that I used when I curated the retrospective exhibition of her work in 2008 at Standard Bank Gallery.
Right.
Yeah, because you also indicated that you want to add something to this discussion.
Well,
Jack.
just that this was one of the books produced by Bruce Atwood, her husband at the time, at Brudersturm Press in 1982. And it's really interesting. If you go on to the next image, the umbilical cord follows its way through starting from the beginning through the entire book. In fact, they call this an extended drawing. The format is what's called a leporello, which is the term we use, although they also call this kind of a book which you can unfold in its entirety and put in a vitrine. They also call it a concertina book or an accordion book. And it's got a wonderful case made by Peter Carstens, who was the great bookbinder in Johannesburg.
Okay, great. So that brings us to Skotnes Skotnes. It's a wonderful story being told here. I think the story is about the origins of creativity, and the story goes something like that. You know, it's a woman, a wife deserted by a husband. The only thing left of the husband is his coat on the rack there, and she has to raise her own children. And she was wondering how to do that. You know, what do you do with your daughter? Do you teach her how to cut and sew? And eventually, will she then cut and sew your death shroud? What do you do with your son? Do you teach him how to hunt? Do you teach him how to use the catapult so that he can go on to become a soldier and kill people? Eventually, you know, she gets beyond all of this by looking at acts of creativity to transmute all of these things. So a fascinating story here. The other wonderful part about this book is the unique drawing that is in each of these books. Jack, is there something you want to add to this?
Well, this is the colophon page, which describes in artist books how they were made and the technique used and that kind of thing. The text is a very peculiar typeface font called Visigoth, which was commissioned by Caspar Schmidt in New York, and for Umbondi editions. The story behind the book is quite remarkable, because one day Warren was visiting Peter Carstens, the bookbinder. His wife Lunetta Bart studied under Peter Carstens, and they were looking through various piles of things, and Warren came across a whole lot of these pages, unbound, of course. And there were 21 in all. Does it give an edition number in the colophon?
It's supposed to be 75, but
okay.
I don't know whether all of them have been printed.
I believe the others were lost. So I think there are probably only 21 copies, certainly in this binding, because having found them, we contacted Judith and Wilma Stockenstrom and asked them what they would like to do. And Judy said that she's so thrilled about the fact that we found them, because I think Caspar Schmidt intended to publish this in New York. Certainly the imprint is Umbondi Editions, New York, where it was printed, but it was actually bound in South Africa on this really remarkable bookbinding, quite unlike many of Peter's bookbindings, which are inclined to be more heavy. This is quite frivolous and with a beautiful paste paper cover. Thank goodness it has a slipcase to protect.
This page, for instance, what Judith did while she was doing this book was she created marbleized paper, which she then would cut up or tear out to assemble or to collage this type of image. And then, as you said, then husband Bruce Atwood would then turn this via a lithographic process into these fascinating pages. Jack, I'm mindful of the time, so here are some other examples of Judith's books in your collection.
A unique book of Judith's, bound in barbed wire with a metal cover and some gloves to handle it because it can become quite dangerous. It's all about the shootings in Treuvel when she lived in Johannesburg. She used to hear the shootings. This is a wonderful book made out of a hacksaw with a quote from Chaucer in gold. So I don't know how many people would consider this to be a book, but certainly Judy did, and we do. This is a wonderful book that she did with her husband, Bruce, and who made the marquetry on the cover. So this is a wooden cover with these beautiful details. It almost looks like. This is another book.
This is one of my favorites, this one.
Yeah, tongue in cheek. It's called The Fishhook Reader, an anthology of graffiti, addenda, and marks of dubious origin found in public library books in the Southern Cape Peninsula and reproduced here in facsimile. Bloody liar, it says. It's full of scratches
So she took out the text and only retained the annotations and the marks and the scratchings and the underlines.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating book.
Yeah. Conceptual.
Okay, Jack, we are going to move on to the portfolios. Now, do you consider portfolios also to be artist books?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Portfolio can have sort of two meanings. It can be a book made in signatures, which is with the fold of the book. The French love to have their books unbound when they buy them. In the older days, they used to send the book to their private bookbinder, who would bind it up for them or not. But a portfolio can also be a book which is not intended to be bound because it doesn't have a fold like these. These are separate plates, and we have lots of portfolios.
Okay, so what we're looking at is a well-known portfolio by Pippa Skotnes, White Wagons. It consists of 7 prints. I'm only showing you 3 of them here. And it is basically working with the 1909 texts by the Reverend Samuel Dorman, who wrote about what is known as the Dorsland Trek. That was the second great trek in the turn of the 20th century, where a lot of the trekkers went into the then Bechuanaland, but they, of course, perished because of lack of water and food. And so Pippa then took that whole story and she created 7 wonderful works. Pippa, of course, was taught by the legendary Catherine Harris at the Michaelis Art School, and that's why I think all her prints are so immaculate. When you look at them, you will see the circular shape, obviously referencing the wagon wheels, but apart from that, also could possibly refer to the shape of the leather pouches and bags that the San people use to collect edible roots. And the likes. A really, truly remarkable portfolio. She has her own press, the Axe Age Press, and this portfolio was done there as well. Just a little bit more about Pippa then. You're looking at, she was the Standard Bank Young Artist Award winner in 1993, and on the left-hand side, that is the cover of the catalogue at the time, where she explored the iconography of the San people. Also, the title of that exhibition refers to that Dorsland Trek. in the wake of the White Wagon. Then next to that, that is a normal trade edition of Pippa's book, Heaven's Things. And if I'm not mistaken, you have the original in your collection.
Right.
I think Pippa is most famous for this exhibition that she curated at Iziko in 1996, Miscast, very controversial at the time. She was really interrogating the manner in which the Bushman or the San was presented in museums, dioramas, and the like. She's also, I think, in my mind, and this is something I really admire about her, the manner in which she opened the archives of those two famous 19th century researchers, Wilhelm Bleek and Lucy Lloyd. Those two, as some of you might know, pleaded with the authorities of the Breekwater prison to allow them to take some prisoners back to their home in Mowbray in Cape Town, where they studied the San language and also the San rock art. And the book on the left, Claim to the Country, she draws on that archive, making a strong case that the San people are really the First Nation of South Africa. Now, the interesting thing is the book on the right, also by Pippa, and it just shows you how comprehensive the archive is, because in Lucy Lloyd's archive, she refers to the George Stowe archive of earlier work that he did on the San, and then she brought all that together and published it in that book. And then she continued the idea of the archive in other, and I'm talking about Pippa. Now, some of you might remember Vanessa Phillips the other day speaking about cabinets of curiosities. We had one on sale on the 11th of June, and then Pippa and Gwen van Emden went around the UCT campus, and they stumbled across many other of these cabinet of curiosities. That's the cover of the book. Next to that, how Pippa then goes on to theorize the idea and the significance of the archive. And the one on the right, Pippa, I think, spearheaded that one. She was the driving force there, and that is the trip that Lucy Lloyd's niece, Wilhelm Bleek's daughter, undertook. You know, Dorothea Bleek, she took on the research and she continued that, and the whole story of that travel is in that particular book. Okay, moving on very quickly, because I am mindful of time. Here's another portfolio. This time it is by Beth Armstrong. 27 metal engravings in this portfolio, edition of 10. Beth Armstrong was the Standard Bank Young Artist Award winner of 2017. You can't see much there, but this is what they look like. Very intimate, very delicate interior scenes. And then the HIF, you mentioned the HIF. Yes, we have a portfolio on the sale. It consists of 28 prints. It is in an edition of 101, and Mark Atwood told me that it sold out in no time. Mark Atwood from the Artist Press. Now, you mentioned earlier on that you can frame these, and here I have a selection of them. They are, I asked my very good friend, the artist Fiona Paul, because she is also included in this portfolio by that, what looks like a barn owl over there. And this is what she did with her portfolio. She framed them, and it is hanging in, of course, her husband is from the atelier, the framing shop at 44 Stanley Avenue, and beautiful display of that portfolio. If we have time at the end, we might come back to HIF 1 and 2 and 4 from your website. but let's just move on. Of course, in the portfolio, you will see the William Kentridge. That is the one on the left. You know, I always say when it comes to Kentridge, you have to ask yourself now, why on earth would he draw a jack? Why a coffee pot? Why an iris? Why a rhinoceros? And I think the clue is in the background, the paper on which this is printed. This is an old Chinese dictionary, you know. So William, as you well know, uses the old Larousse encyclopedias, the shorter Oxford dictionary for many of his, but this particular one, he used the Chinese one, and that of course refers to a big exhibition of 2015 in Beijing at the Ullens Center of Contemporary Art in Beijing. That was called Notes Towards a Model Opera. I'm showing you the cover of that catalog. And when you take off the dust jacket and fold it open, you have a wonderful poster, as you can see at the bottom. It's a very rare catalog because it was, most of the copies were confiscated by the authorities. William, in this work, looked at the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s, as well as the colonial African history and the Paris Commune of 1968. And the authorities, some of them, the Chinese authority might have taken exception to that. So, so it is a very rare one. Okay, I'm quickly moving on to this particular portfolio. It's called the Color Line Portfolio, more contemporary South African artists participating in this particular portfolio. 21 prints. You can see this is a composite image, an edition of 44. So it's really also very worthwhile to look at this particular portfolio. Of course, the Malien Dumas portfolio, The Fog of War from 2006. 4 prints, as well as one print of text, edition of 80, and very characteristic of imagery. Portfolio of etchings, Cecily Sash here from 1975, 6 etchings here, edition of 75. And even, you know, you also refer to these magazines, literary magazines like the ISBI. ISBI is the Zulu word for voice. And the work on the left is on the online sale. But I just want to point out in 2005, Warren Seibritz and Michael Gardner put up a wonderful exhibition of South African literary magazines, and you can see the cover of that catalogue on the right-hand side. You also mentioned Wilhelm, and that is, of course, is yeah, the artist, what is his name? Help me out, Jack. I forgot.
Wopko Jensma.
There you go. There you go.
Phil,
so do you
Phil
consider
Duplessis.
these literary magazines also as artist books?
Yes, absolutely. Quite often they had original prints incorporated into them. One very famous one had a they were published in editions of 250. So whoever the artist was contributing the graphic had to do it in an edition of 250, which was a huge job. And one of them was contributed by Walter Battiss, which caused a sensation because it was one of his erotic prints. And of course, that's become a major collectible.
Indeed, the ISBI was, you know, published between 1971 and 1974. There were about 20 issues. It was edited by Stephen Gray and Phil Duplessis, and they, as you say, you know, they approached artists just to spice up the poems and the short stories that you would find in these magazines. They would approach artists to contribute prints. And Cecil Skotnes participated, Battiss, Christo Kutsia, Helmut Starker, Norman Catherine, many artists. And as you indicated, you know, the editions actually grew. They were quite large. You know, there are editions of 200, of 250. This particular one has an edition of 380, I think. I think as the readership grew, so they published more. You know, and as you say, you know, those artists had to sign every one of those prints and number them as well. So it is actually quite remarkable to have a look at them.
But also this cover is an original print. So
there you go. Yeah. There's also Battiss. You mentioned Battiss and his contribution to is there. One issue, he designed the envelope, for instance, of that, and he asked Norman Catherine to design the stamp, famous book stamp for that particular one. Yeah, but I'll show that at a later stage because I'm planning another Zoom meeting. Okay, Jack, I think we're almost out of time. I don't know if you want to say anything in conclusion. That's certainly my story. And as you can see, wonderful selection of artist books and portfolio on offer on our online.
Yes. I just wanted to sort of put in context that many artists made artist books. They often had different dealers because the collecting public didn't often collect books and art. I collect both, but some people specialize in artist books. I just wanted to mention the few South Africans who were major contributors to the genre. In no particular order, there was Giulio Tambellini, Stefan Erasmus, of course, Judy Mason, Keith Diedrich, who's done many, Cecil Skotnes and Pippa, his daughter, Kim Berman, William Kentridge. William Kentridge, as I say, has made about 100. We've got about 120 of his books in our collection. Most of them are just art monographs, but I think you can consider 20 of them artist books. So, and of course, there are many South African artists who've made artist books. Stephen Hobbs, Gordon Froud, Peter Clark's books are highly collectible. I remember visiting him with Liz Fels, who also made artist books in the Cape when I was there many years ago, and luckily managed to buy some from him at the time. I don't think they were ever publicly sold or commercially sold. Robert Hodgins has made books, Gail Berman, Colin Richards, and David Payton himself.
Fascinating. Jack, we can't wait for lockdown to end to rush over to your book center at WAM.
Well, it's open to the public, and the new the new website will include search facilities, so you'll be able to choose the books you'd like to see before you come, and it will be a pleasure to welcome you. Thank you very much for making this complicated show, Wilhelm. I'm agog at how you do it.
You're most welcome, Jack. Thank you again. It was really a privilege to have you. Okay, Matt,
thank you.
Over to you.
Yeah,
good. Thanks, Matthew.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, Jack. I want to ask. I've got all sorts of questions to ask you, and you know, I just from you know, with a very special attachment to Wits. I remember the ladies of the Special Collections library at the Cullen Library. They've got that wing in the Special Collection.
Right.
And I remember one of them that, you know, that we chatted about these are the subject librarians, and we chatted about my research and helped me. The one, and you know, then I said, oh no, you know, I'm doing a bit of art history, and the lady said, please, if you ever see William Kentridge, just tell him to stop drawing on those lovely books. I thought it was endearing, because I said to her, well, you know, in a way, this the pages and leaves of these wonderful objects will probably be opened and breathed so much more life into, and given so much more richness and texture than ever before. And you know, I said, so in many ways, for me, at least my interpretation of William's intervention into the book and the found object was a new life and another sort of palimpsest in the creation of the artist's book. So it's really a fabulous experience listening to you, and fascinating to hear you and Wilhelm speak about. I think such a nuanced part of our collecting that has really, under your website, come alive, and that resource and archive is just absolutely amazing. I know that's going to be the first place that I'm going to be dashing over to on my web exploration. So thank you so much. I think your contribution to the field is incomparable, and we are so very lucky to have you. So again, thank you so much for joining Strauss & Company today.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for attending the talk.
Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick reminder, thank you to Jack Ginsberg. We were joined with Wilhelm van Rensburg, speaking about the artist's books and portfolios. Some of those items are on our online sale currently taking place, which will close on Monday evening. Tomorrow we've got the specialists doing an interdepartmental relay, as we'll call it. So we are going to be doing, we're going to have Sophie Louise Froelich speaking about silver and novelty items. Higo Jacobs is going to be speaking to us about Cape Heritage wine theme inspired by Chenin and Pinotage. Then Dr. Alistair Meredith and Jean-Luc Theron, amongst some other specialists, going to be talking about some of the modern pictures that we've got on sale, and I'll be whipping us through the contemporary art on sale. Be sure again to tune in for Monday, when we've got another round of programming, and we're going to be doing Monday, instead of our usual traditional full wine session, we're going to be doing half wine and half specialists, just as to bring some of the highlights to life of the Eve's closing sale on Monday, and then on Tuesday and Wednesday we carry on with our next our new installment, which is our auctioneering masterclass, looking at significant moments in South African auctioneering history and museum moments, which we're going to be joined by Christopher Till from the Javits Center, so at University of Pretoria. So very exciting lineup next week. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We're 5:05. Let me not take any more of your time. Have a good evening and stay safe. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Matt.
Thank you, Matthew.